So gang, any thoughts on the video or any key words that you may have picked up as part of our focus on time?
Are we supposed to raise our hand first? I'm sorry.
That's okay, Chanel, go ahead.
Okay, so I really enjoyed that video because every morning when I wake up, that's the first thing that I turn on is motivational videos. And I was gonna recommend one of my favorite like I guess YouTube channels. It's called Motiversity. So
Yeah.
that's like my favorite one to watch all the time. But I definitely enjoyed that because that's just something. And I let it. I normally just like let it play, and like a lot of things just stick out to me about certain things, and like throughout my day I just think of those certain like quotes that stick with me, and I just so when I like don't feel like doing something or whatever, I just think about the quote. Because like yesterday the one I was watching, it was talking about if you literally don't feel like doing something, do it. Like I know this is something small, like I didn't feel like cleaning my fish tank, but I was like, since I don't feel like doing that, I might as well just do it. But yeah, that's what all I wanted to say.
Good, Chanel, thank you. Yeah, that's a good one, Motiversity, and I think that's from Jocko. Talks about when you don't feel like it, just do it, right? Just do it. Get up, do it. Don't feel like doing your dishes, do it. Don't feel like working out, do it. Because I think that's the self-discipline that you have to draw on. It's easy for us not to do things, but it is the simple things, Chanel, that you just talked about that drive that level of self-discipline that builds on your character as you move through life. Alicia?
I agree with you guys about what you're saying with just doing it when you don't feel like it, because that is a mentality that I developed either like senior year of high school or into college, because I am somebody that literally works all the time on multiple different things. So sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I don't want to do it. I want to push it off and do it later. But then I think like I'm not going to want to do it later either. So I might as well just do it now. So I go and I do it and I get it out of the way. That way I still get everything done.
Great, good, thank you. The lady that you heard in the beginning, her name is Mel Robbins, and she was a newscaster and entrepreneurial, and she has this story that she talks about. Her husband was a restaurateur, lost his business, and they were just in a world of hurt. And so she was laying in bed, and I don't know what made her think of this. It was like a rocket ship. And, when a rocket ship, you count down, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So she said it's a simple concept, but if you use that countdown, starting at 5 and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, go. That little mental countdown will help you do just what we talked about, right? So boom. And Chanel, yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? That's a really good one. Again, Mel Robbins, it's a good little technique. So if you're not feeling motivated, count down. Because if you count up, it just keeps going. But if you start at 5 and go to 1, you can go to 0 and you can go. But at the end of the day, another good technique just to really hone in on that motivation and that discipline. And, we all see these videos and we get motivated and we could jump up and down, high fives. That stuff eventually wears off. It's that discipline of doing, that discipline of managing your time and really staying focused on the things that are important. And that importance has to equal happiness. So we're going to shift gears. Thank you for that level of engagement. Great stuff. So we're going to talk about focus. So I have a little Instagram, which you see up here, that circle and the K. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I do have an Instagram. It's Kooper Leadership Academy that I post these out every morning. So this happens to be about focus, and it's hard to have extraordinary performance if you don't have extraordinary focus. And again, the things that we're asking are of ourselves, whether it's a student, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a dancing, art, whatever we're doing, that focus matters. And I think that in life, there's so many distractions that you all are dealing with, I deal with on a daily basis. I call it background chatter. I really got to hone in and say, if I'm going to get this done and I'm really going to be extraordinary at what I do, I have to focus. And this is just a quote that, nice view of that. And that's what we're going to talk about. This is the second part of the trifecta, is focusing. So let's switch to the next slide. And a little quote here you might want to write down: the absence of execution is the single biggest obstacle to success. So like Alicia, you mentioned, if I know I have to do something, but I don't do it, that's the opposite of execution, right? So the absence of that is an obstacle. So think of some other things that in the last 30 days, when we asked you to do the homework, I asked you to, even gave you the Friday check-in, little accountability check-in. What are the things that are getting in your way to being an obstacle to success? What are some of these things that are driving absence of execution or absence of doing? Just in the last 30 days, what has gotten in your way to achieve the things that you set out to achieve? Anybody have some examples? Mary?
One example for me is that I was like dead set that I was going to start running consistently again, like maybe a month ago. And then I think it rained for that whole entire month, so I couldn't go running. But then I was like, you know what, I just have to go, because as soon as I go, it'll start like a chain reaction. I'll feel better, and then I'll want to keep going. But sometimes like uncontrollable things can get in the way, like weather.
Okay. Yeah, Andy, that's right. So remember we talked about, I think, Mary, when we talked about that commitment and being interested or committed, the weather's the weather, right? So that's an excuse. I don't want to run because it's not 70 degrees. It's not the kind of ideal weather I'm running in. And that's okay. But there's other ways you can say, well, I'm going to exercise. I want to do something. But weather is one of those things that we can always distract us from executing. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Good example. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. What else? Tim?
Yeah, I had this saying that I was going to wait until after I graduate to really start looking for a job, or get near the end of it, then begin to look. And then it seems like all hell started breaking loose on the job, and I'm like, you know what? Why should I put off when I can just start right now? So I mean, it's simple. I start making excuses. Well, I stopped making excuses and just start like daily looking for things that I'd be interested in, instead of just waiting around and sitting in idle time wasters, not doing nothing.
Yeah, good. So Tim, go back to the time matrix, right? That we talked about. Where were you falling in your quadrant? So you're working 12 hours a day, things are getting crazy at work. You come home, you're like, man, I don't have the energy to look for a job. Where do you end up?
I think I was in quadrant 3, distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like everything else was coming before, and I just like put it on the back burner.
Yeah, and that's the discipline of carving out 10 minutes. Say, look, all I can give it is 10 minutes today, but I'm going to do it, and that now becomes a habit. Like Alicia said, it's easy to say not to do it, but if I say I may not be able to give 30 minutes to it, but by golly, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes. And that mental getting it done reinforces why it's important and doesn't become that obstacle. Thank you for sharing, Tim.
Yes, sir.
So we're college students. Weather's getting nice. Get out on Davidson lawn, laying out. Is that a distraction? Is that an obstacle to getting things done? The weather, whether it's raining because I don't want to run, or just it's sunny and it's much better being outside than inside doing something I like to do versus what I need to do. Does that sound familiar, Alicia?
It is and it isn't for me at the same time, because I'm somebody that loves to be outside when it's nice. Like, I never want to be inside.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, I noticed like we had rain nonstop for a week and a half. and it was really cold. And then last week we actually had some really nice days. But the first nice, like, sunny day that we had, it made me completely motivated to do everything. So I wanted to go outside. I wanted to get my work done for school. I wanted to get stuff around, like, the apartment done. I was just motivated to do everything when the weather was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good example where it's a motivator. And I was thinking more on the time if you had to do those things, but instead of like going out and studying, you opted to, do something that wasn't on your list to get done. So that's a good example of where the weather did motivate you because you're cabin fever, but at the end of the day, you were able to get it done. It wasn't an obstacle to you. And that's a good example of utilizing a motivator to motivate you to get things done. So very good. All right, Andy, let's go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about when we think of focusing, and this is a fruit versus the root mentality. So if we think about the things that we do in life, this tree and the root really represents the easy and the things that we're working to build a strong root system. So if you think about your goals and your objectives and what you're really focused on in terms of getting the things that we need to get done, what would that fruit represent that's easy? I can just get up there, I can pick it off, and I can enjoy the fruits of my labor. What would be an example of a fruit versus root mentality when we're thinking about focusing on the goals and objectives, the things that we have to do during the day? And what would be an example of that apple that's just easy to do? It's fruit, I can pick it off, I can enjoy it, and I can go on about my day. Mary?
I think one example would be like putting things on your to-do list that you're either like you almost have done, or just putting something on there just to check it off. So like an example for me would be like sending an email or making my bed. Like I do those things every day, but I could put it on my to-do list to like feel more productive or something.
Okay, well, that's a good example of where there's things that you're doing, they're easy to do, and you go about your day, whether it's the checklist, making your bed, it's a habit. Okay. Marishi, I saw that you had your hand up as well. You have an example of that? A fruit versus root mentality? It may be on mute. There we go.
I'm sorry, did you say mine?
No, he says his mic's not working. So that's okay. If you want to type something, or we know that your mic's not working. So, okay. Anybody else on the fruit versus root mentality? Tim?
Yeah, I just noticed something the other day when it was nice outside, washing your car. Normally, I would wash it at home because I like doing my own, because I noticed that when you take it through an automatic car wash, it just cleans the surface, but it don't get deep down and really clean the dirt off. It's like it's masked. So instead of doing it myself, I just decided to go through the quick car wash so I wouldn't have to worry about it. But at the end of the day, when I looked at it, I could still see dirt.
Right. So that root part of this fruit versus root is really about transformation, right? So
Right.
you think about the fruit and the ease of that, and there's all kinds of different studies about it. When I think about this group, you're looking at, the things that we're building, but that root represents the strong values of leadership. It's how we managing our time, how are we treating people, how are we spending the time that we have to give back. I mean, to me, that's all part of this root system as individuals and as leaders, because the stronger the root system is, the more abundant the fruit's going to be, right? Because the deeper the roots go, the more nutrients you get. And a lot of times people just operate at the surface level. And do you know what I mean when I say people operate at the surface level?
Yes.
Okay. Give me an example.
Well, I guess going back to my previous example of like the email, if I was just like skimming through, like if I got 3 tasks, for instance, from my boss, and I saw the first one was like super easy, or I could just ask someone else to do it, I wasn't like digging into the work or committing to fully doing it, then that would be like surface work.
Okay, good. The other thing I think about, let's just use the goals that we put up there. And this is maybe if you look at the photo of the tree and think of those apples as your goal. And those goals are stated, they're easy to see, but then think about the things that we talked about with the SMART objectives. To really achieve those goals, I'm going to have a really good root system. And we talked about the challenges of not achieving. So if you think about your goal as it stands today, as you've noted it, what would be an example of some root building that you need to do to ensure that you continue to have a flourishing tree to produce fruit? What would need to be in the root of your goal system, or this tree that's bearing this great fruit? What are some things that you're really going to have to focus on? And some of you wrote that in your statement on your, when I'm looking through both your goal statement, your professional connections, you said, here are some things I'm going to have to do differently. So kind of go back to some work that you've already done. What would represent the root of your goal if it's the fruit?
I guess I'll jump in here real quick, Gary, and just an example that comes to mind for me is thinking about relationships and whether you are intentionally building those over time and investing in other people, trying to make those relationships stronger versus maybe just taking them for advantage, or when it's convenient, reaching out to some of those relationships and when you know that you need to be making more of an effort.
Great example, Andy. I have one of those as myself, as I have a journal that I have, and every day, or each week I set out with goals that I want to achieve. And underneath one of my goal 2 is family and friends. And it says, very specifically, I need to be intentional about making contact with X person, right? So for me, the fruit is making that's the friend, that's the fruit, but that root is intentional contact, right? Whether it's a letter, an email, a phone call, preferably. So Andy, that's a great prompt. To friends may be the fruit, but that root has to be intentional engagement of that relationship with that person. So Kevin, you have some things in your professional meeting, the fruit, the root mentality. One of the things that you said you had written down that you really drew on, which I highlighted, about, you said, the nervousness and you might mess something up, the good first impression. So your fruit might be, hey, I've got a meeting with somebody important, and that root for you might be, how do I make sure that I'm preparing for that meeting in a way that, my nerves are less than what they might be if I didn't prepare otherwise. That would be a root example. Again, not suggesting that you weren't prepared, but anytime that you're trying to make a good first impression, there could be some nerves. So how do I practice my introduction? How do I make sure I'm polished in my opening statement? What's my elevator speech on why I'm meeting with you? Those types of things. Does that make sense, gang? I feel like I may have lost the group on the fruit versus root mentality. Is it clear to everybody? Just, Justice, I know you had your hand raised. I apologize, I missed you. You want to jump in? with some thoughts?
No worries. I was just gonna give another example. For me, this is more to I am on the tennis team, so this is more towards tennis. I feel like fruit is obviously getting the wins in conference or being second team all conference or something. That's my goal. But for that, I mean, I have to kind of like get in the extra work during the time now and off. I mean, off the match court when I'm on practice or something, get in the extra work there to get the finally get the fruits.
Absolutely. Great example. And sports are always a good analogy of where the fruit's the win, it's a trophy, but the root is getting up early, putting in the extra effort, staying over. You know, there's lots of analogies. If it's, you know, wanting to be a CEO, that's the fruit, but what's that root going to look like? If I'm going to go to get my graduate degree, here's the fruit. I can see it, but what's that root going to look like? So every one of your goals that you've talked about or you've at least written down, imagine that being the fruit on this tree of yours. And then that, how deep does that root system go so that you're ready to go and you're continuing to bear that good fruit? That's where the focus comes in, right? The goal is the goal, but if I'm really going to achieve that goal, how do I focus on those things underneath the surface? So think internally in me, what am I going to need to do differently about me to ensure that I'm driving forward and achieving the goals that I've set out for myself? And they're simple, right? You heard Mel Robbins and saying, you know, just no one's going to be there to push us. We got to push ourselves, and we can be motivated by a nice speech, but at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to discipline. It's going to boil down to focus. You have the goals, you have the energy, but if you don't have a strong root system, like I said earlier, you may very well have, you can sell your goal. It's easy just to walk away and give it to somebody else. Okay. Any other thoughts? Andy, any additional ideas on the fruit versus root? I love the friendship idea or example. Marisha, you going to try again? Is your speaker working?
Yeah, I got it fixed.
All right. Good. Glad to hear you.
So I was gonna say that about the fruit versus the root. I was about to say it's just like we've been talking about being committed and just being interested. And like I was gonna say that most of the time we tend to just go for the easy stuff, and for the hard stuff we are afraid of failure because we don't know if we're gonna succeed on when we set up for ourselves or not. And for the commitment part, it's like that's part of like of the roots, the extra work you always put in order to get where you need to go to get them in.
Great example. That extra work, right? That's down there at the bottom of that root system there that say, I got to put in a little extra effort. The more effort I put in, maybe I'm going to bear more fruit. Great examples. Thank you for sharing.
And I guess, Gary, I did think of one other quick one here. I'm almost double many of your ages in this group. So I've had the opportunity to be a part of hundreds of team settings, whether it was in school or business or university or whatever it might be. And I'm thinking that a good way to view fruit versus root in a team setting is, say you're with a group of 5 people and there's no identified leader. Are you going to be the one to step up and help drive the results for that particular project? Or are you going to sort of stand back, wait for somebody else to make the first move? Or if you raise your hand for an extra commitment or some, in my case, some national conference in education or just some effort outside of Kooper just to contribute to the broader academic community, am I going to keep that commitment and really do my part and be proactive and keep things moving? Or as I get busy, sometimes you fall into a trap of not going forward with what you committed to do. So this idea of in team settings, always being willing to step up and do what you said you were going to do, if not more.
Great, Andy. Thank you. So again, it's just a little tool. Again, this is, you know, part of what we're trying to give you a little knowledge of how these things might be relevant. You know, I'm a visual person, so it relates to me. So again, as all of us talked about, the fruits up above, it's what we want to achieve. It's what we want to be. It's that root system that's going to help ensure that our tree continues to bear the fruit that we want it to bear as leaders. And again, leadership, and I know we talk about leadership in different ways. To me, leadership isn't about a position. It's really about who you are as an individual, the example that Andy gave. Are you just stepping up to make a difference? If you see somebody that needs help, are you helping them? That's leadership. All of us have leadership inside of us. It's not always a position. It's really how we behave. It's how we act. It's what we do. And, so I think this is another example that just came to me. The act of kindness is the apple. It's easy, but it's the core of who we are as individuals that allows that fruit to be bared and for people to see. But if I'm genuinely not a good person, at some point, I'm not going to help people, and my root system is going to be pretty narrow and not very deep, because I don't have friends. I haven't networked very well. I can go get something from somebody, which is easy, but if I'm not doing something in return or reciprocating that favor, then that root will eventually of friendship will eventually die, and that fruit of friendship will not bear fruit on my tree.